Husband dragged wife at dinner. After his dad humiliated her unaware, she was the secret billionaire who just bought his dad's company. He didn't just walk her out, he dragged her in front of everyone. On the very night his father mocked her at the family's grand dinner, he gripped her wrist, scraped her chair across the floor, and left her dignity behind the clinking glasses. "You don't belong here, Emily, you're embarrassing us. Leave." Those were the words Daniel chose while his father smiled. Instead of defending his wife, he handed her to humiliation. Instead of love, he chose pride. He believed she was small, powerless, easy to forget. But what he never knew was that the woman he shamed was the quiet owner of a storm, the secret billionaire behind Aurora Holdings, the buyer who had already taken his father's company without a sound. Sometimes the person dragged from the table returns to own the room. This is not just another dinner gone wrong. It is the breaking of a cruel tradition, the rise of a woman they tried to erase, and the calm power that ends empires with a whisper. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it is like letting her voice be silenced again at that table. When you click that button, you stand with every woman mocked, every partner betrayed, and every quiet heart that chose to rise. Please subscribe now. And in the comments, share where you're watching from. The alarm rang at 5 a.m., slicing through the quiet like a blade. Emily Carter's eyes opened instantly. She didn't flinch or sigh, she simply reached out, turned it off, and sat up straight. Her movements were graceful, precise, almost trained. The kind of discipline that didn't come from habit alone, but from years of responsibility no one could see. Steam drifted from the cup of black coffee she made herself. No sugar, no cream. She stood by the kitchen window, watching the faint lights spill across the small, suburban backyard. Her reflection shimmered on the glass. Perfect posture, calm face, hair tied in a neat twist. To anyone passing by, she was just another quiet wife preparing for another ordinary day. But the heavy silver watch hidden under her sleeve told another story. It was a limited edition Patek Philippe, a piece that could buy the entire neighborhood if sold. No one in this town knew who Emily truly was. Not her neighbors, not her husband, not even his father, who liked to remind her often that she married up. Emily Carter was 32, the founder and CEO of Aurora Holdings, a multinational investment firm that quietly owns several industrial companies. She built it from nothing after her parents' small business collapsed when she was 19. The pain of watching everything they worked for vanish had taught her one rule: power should be quiet, and quiet power was what she mastered. But that morning, something different lingered in her eyes, a kind of still tension. She stood at the counter, phone in hand, staring at a message from her assistant, Grace. "All acquisition documents are ready for signature, ma'am. Just need your confirmation before the dinner," Emily typed back. "Proceed. Make sure everything remains under Aurora's name." Her finger hovered before pressing send. She thought about Daniel, her husband. Daniel Carter, 34, was the kind of man people described as nice but uncertain. He was kind to strangers, charming in public, but easily swayed by stronger voices, especially his father's. Richard Carter, CEO of Carter Industrial Group, had built his company with old money and even older pride. He saw Daniel's marriage to Emily as a downgrade, convinced she was from the middle of nowhere. Emily pressed send. The message went through. "Does your husband know?" Grace texted back within seconds. Emily smiled faintly, the kind that hides both sadness and confidence. "He will," she replied, "when it matters." She placed the phone down gently and took a deep breath. The morning light turned golden as Daniel walked into the kitchen, still adjusting his tie. His shirt was slightly wrinkled, his hair tousled, but his grin was bright. "You're up early again," he said, reaching for toast. "You work harder than anyone I know, even without a boss breathing down your neck." Emily looked at him, her expression soft. "Old habits," she said. "They die hard." He laughed and kissed her forehead. "You should relax more. Tonight's a big deal, Dad's birthday dinner. Let's make a good impression, yeah?" There it was, the word impression. It always came before one of his father's dinners. She nodded, pretending not to notice the small tremor in her chest. Daniel didn't mean harm. He loved her. She knew that. But love, she'd learned, wasn't always strong enough to stand up to pride. "Your father's expecting us at 7?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah. Try not to wear anything too, you know, simple. He'll be looking for something a bit more expensive," she finished gently. Daniel hesitated. "He just has certain expectations." Emily smiled faintly and looked down at her hands. "Of course." Her silence made him shift uneasily, but he didn't apologize. He just took another sip of coffee, already glancing at his phone. After he left for work, Emily walked back to the bedroom. She opened the wardrobe, rows of neatly pressed dresses in soft pastels. At the end hung a single deep emerald gown, silk, simple cut but elegant. She brushed her fingers along it, remembering the last time she wore it, her company's founding gala 5 years ago. A quick flash of memory. Standing under bright lights, shaking hands with investors, smiling at the camera. Her name printed on magazines beside the headline, "The youngest woman to own an industrial empire." She blinked, and the image faded. The quiet, the house returned. She whispered to herself, "He doesn't need to know that version of me. Not yet." Her phone buzzed again, Daniel's text. "Dad said to bring that coworker of mine, Megan. You've met her before. She's helping with the new project. Don't mind her if she talks a lot." Emily's thumb froze over the screen. A faint, unreadable smile curved her lips. She typed a simple reply, "Of course, I'll see you there." She set the phone aside, her gaze distant. Outside, the golden morning softened into haze. Then softly, almost like a whisper to herself, she said, "After tonight, things will never be the same." The kettle clicked off behind her, the room falling into silence except for the faint buzz of her phone screen lighting up again. It was Grace. "All done, ma'am. Carter Industrial Group now officially belongs to Aurora Holdings." Emily's calm expression didn't change, but her eyes told a different story. And in the stillness of Dessa, that quiet morning, something powerful had already begun. That evening, at the dinner table, silence would cut deeper than words, and one man's pride would ignite a humiliation that no one would forget. The restaurant shimmered with gold light and murmurs of laughter. Crystal chandeliers hung above a long mahogany table set for 12. It was the kind of place that smelled of money, quiet, aged, and proud. Emily Carter walked in on Daniel's arm, her emerald dress glowing softly under the lights. She smiled politely at the waiter, at the guests, at the silence that followed her entrance. Every eye turned toward her, assessing her, including Richard Carter's. Richard, the patriarch, sat at the head of the table. 60 years old that night, built from iron will and an ego twice as heavy. He rose halfway when they approached, clapping Daniel on the back. "Son," he said warmly, before glancing at Emily with a polite, cold smile. "And Emily," his tone carried the weight, twos of judgment more than welcome. At Richard's left sat Megan Hayes, Daniel's co-worker. Early 30s, red dress, perfectly curled hair. She leaned close to Richard, laughing easily. Her perfume drifted through the air, expensive and deliberate. She looked at Emily like someone who already knew too much. "Ah, you must be Megan," Emily said kindly. Megan smiled with just her lips. "Yes. Daniel talks about me all the time at work." Emily's gaze flickered, only for a second, before she pulled out her chair and sat. Dinner began. Polished silverware clinked. Waiters moved silently. For a while, conversation was simple business, travel, stocks. Emily remained quiet, listening, hands folded in her lap. Then Richard leaned forward, his glass of wine halfway raised. "So, Emily," he said, "tell me again what you do these days. Daniel mentioned consulting?" She smiled faintly. "Yes, I work in finance consulting, mostly private investments." Richard laughed, loud enough for the whole table. "Consulting? My dear, that's what people say when they don't have real jobs." A few guests chuckled nervously. Daniel looked down at his plate. Megan tilted her head, her voice smooth like honey but sharp underneath. "Maybe she's just between projects, Richard. Happens to the best of us." Emily's face didn't move. Her eyes, calm and deep, didn't flinch. She set her fork down slowly and dabbed her mouth with a napkin. "I suppose so," she said softly. "Some projects just take longer to finish than others." Richard leaned back, satisfied that he'd made his point. That's the trouble with marrying outside your circle. No ambition, no understanding of how business works. The laughter that followed felt heavy, forced. Emily's gaze drifted downward, then caught a folder near Richard's hand, a sleek black binder with the gold letters, Carter Industrial Group, Confidential Annual Report. Her eyes lingered for a moment. She knew every figure in that report, every signature, every hidden clause, because it was hers. But she said nothing. She simply lifted her glass, calm and composed. To family, she said quietly, and to the lessons it teaches us. A few clinks followed, uncertain. Daniel avoided her eyes. Megan smirked behind her glass. Richard smoothed his tie. The silence that settled wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, waiting. And beneath the polished table, Emily's hands trembled just slightly. Because she knew something they didn't. This dinner wouldn't end the way they imagined. Across the table, Richard's voice rose again, louder this time, sharper. His next words would shatter everything. Richard's fork hit the table with a sharp clink. "I'll tell you what I think," he said, voice booming across the room. "Daniel, this woman doesn't even belong in this family. She's holding you back." The air froze. Guests stared, forks midair, breath caught between shock and pity. Emily's eyes lifted slowly. "That's enough," she whispered. But Richard wasn't finished. "Enough? I'm speaking the truth. You've done nothing for this family, Emily. You don't even have a proper career. Look at you living off my son's name like a—" Daniel stood up suddenly. "Dad, maybe we should—" Richard's hand cut through the air. "No, Daniel. You've worked hard your whole life, and she brings you nothing but shame." The sound of the room dimmed, replaced by a heartbeat in Emily's ears. Her face remained calm, but her eyes burned with quiet disbelief. "Richard," she said softly, "respect is something earned, not demanded." That line was her mistake. Richard's jaw locked. "Don't you lecture me about respect in my own house." Daniel's hand slammed on the table. "Enough." Everyone jumped. The room fell dead silent. Daniel turned to Emily, eyes wide with anger, fear, confusion. He felt the weight of his father's stare pressing down on him like chains. "Let's go," he said coldly. "You've embarrassed us enough tonight." Before she could reply, he grabbed her wrist. Her chair screeched against the floor as he pulled her away from the table. The guests looked down, pretending not to see. Megan's lips curved into something between guilt and satisfaction. Emily didn't resist. She just looked back once, her gaze landing on Richard's hand, resting on that company binder. As Daniel dragged her toward the door, the thin bracelet on her wrist slipped loose. It fell quietly onto the floor, rolling until it stopped near Richard's shoe. He glanced at it. Just a bracelet, he thought. But if he'd looked closer, he would have seen the tiny engraved logo, Aurora Holdings. Outside the dining room, the hallway stretched in silence. Daniel's grip loosened. He exhaled hard, guilt already mixing with anger. "Why couldn't you just keep quiet?" he said. "Why do you always make it harder?" Emily looked up at him, her voice calm but low. "I didn't make it harder. You just made it smaller." He blinked. "What?" But she didn't answer. She simply pulled her wrist from his hand and walked toward the exit, leaving him standing in the dim hallway caught between his father's pride and his wife's silence. Inside the dining room, Richard bent to pick up the bracelet, turning it once in his fingers before setting it aside. A faint frown crossed his face. Later that night, that same bracelet and the name engraved on it would return to haunt him in a way he never saw coming. The night air was sharp as Daniel shoved the restaurant door open. The sound of it slamming echoed down the marble hallway. Emily followed quietly, her heels clicking against the floor. The laughter from the dinner still rang behind them, muffled, cruel. "Why couldn't you just respect my family?" Daniel's voice cracked like thunder. He turned to her, his face red, hands clenched. "You always have to say something, don't you? You couldn't just smile and nod for once?" Emily stood still under the glow of the parking lot lights, her face pale but calm. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was soft, almost fragile. "I didn't disrespect anyone, Daniel. I defended myself. That's not how it looked." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "You embarrassed me. You embarrassed my father." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't let the tears fall. "Your father humiliated me in front of strangers. And you let him." Daniel froze for a second, his chest rising fast, but instead of answering, he turned away. His silence was heavier than any insult. She took a small step forward. Do you even know what that felt like? He didn't look at her. I know I'm tired of being in the middle of this. You and my father are always… Her voice cut through him like a whisper of pain. I wasn't fighting your father, Daniel. I was protecting your wife. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of wind passing through the trees. Then Daniel sighed and walked toward the car. Just get in, he muttered. Emily followed quietly. Inside, the car filled with the cold silence of two people who had loved each other once deeply and were now strangers pretending to stay calm. As Daniel started the engine, his phone lit up. A message banner flashed on the screen. Megan, he's right. You deserve someone who fits your world. Emily's eyes caught the name, but she said nothing. Her gaze shifted out the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold. She didn't need to ask. The ache in her chest already knew the answer. The drive home was wordless. The only sound was the rhythmic hum of tires against the road, steady, mechanical, distant. Flashback. 2 days before the dinner, Daniel and Megan sat at a quiet bar near the office. Empty glasses glimmered under dim light. She leaned close, her voice silky and understanding. She doesn't see how far you could go, Daniel, Megan whispered. You have your father's gift, but you're always trying to please someone who doesn't understand ambition. Daniel had smiled, drunk on both the wine and her validation. Emily just likes things simple. Megan's hand brushed his. Maybe too simple for a man like you. Her words lingered even now, echoing in his mind as he drove louder than Emily's silence beside him. When they finally pulled into the driveway, Emily opened the door slowly. The porch light flickered, casting long shadows across the yard. She stood for a moment, looking at the man she once believed in. Good night, Daniel, she said quietly, her voice steady but distant. He didn't answer. He only stared down at his phone again, the screen glowing with another message from Megan. Emily turned and walked toward the house, her expression unreadable. Inside, behind her calm, something had begun to shift. The woman who once stayed silent was now listening, learning, remembering. And before dawn, when Daniel slept soundly beside his buzzing phone, Emily would make one final call that would change every name written on his father's empire. The front door slammed behind Emily with a hollow echo that filled the entire house. The sound was sharp, final, like something breaking that couldn't be fixed again. Her shoes hit the floor one by one as she stepped inside, steady but exhausted, every motion precise, deliberate. The house was quiet, too quiet. Daniel's voice had already faded upstairs. He'd gone straight to bed without another word. That was how he handled guilt, by pretending it didn't exist. Emily stood in the hallway for a moment, still in her emerald gown. The faint scent of his cologne drifted from the staircase, mixing with the soft ticking of the clock. She walked to the mirror near the door. Her reflection, stared back, calm face, smudged mascara, eyes still burning from everything unsaid. Slowly she reached up, removed her earrings, and wiped away her makeup with one clean swipe. Her voice came quietly, almost like a whisper to her reflection. They saw a nobody. That's what I wanted them to see. The words lingered in the empty air like smoke. She turned away and walked down the hallway, past framed photos of simple smiles, her and Daniel on their wedding day, laughing under fairy lights. Another of them at the lake, his arms around her shoulders. Each one felt like a stranger's memory now. In their bedroom, she moved to the wardrobe, sliding her hand behind a row of neatly hung clothes. Her fingers pressed against a smooth panel at the back. With a faint click, it opened, revealing a small hidden compartment built into the wall. Inside was a neatly organized collection of documents, sealed folders, and silver-bound notebooks. On top lay a leather portfolio stamped, with gold letters, Carter Industrial Group, Acquisition, Final Phase. She took it out, laying it gently on the desk. The air seemed to shift. The quiet house no longer felt small. It felt vast, powerful, like she was standing inside the center of something enormous. Her phone buzzed softly. She picked it up without hesitation. Caller ID, Grace Turner. Grace was her personal assistant, loyal, discreet, and one of the few who knew the truth. Emily answered, her voice calm. Grace. Ma'am, Grace said, her tone respectful but trembling with excitement. The transfer just went through. You now officially own Carter Industrial Group. For a few seconds, Emily didn't respond. She just breathed slow, controlled. Then she smiled, though her eyes glistened with something between triumph and heartbreak. Then it's time they see who they mocked. Grace hesitated. Do you want me to prepare the public notice? Not yet, Emily said softly. Let them sleep. Let them believe they still own the world. She hung up and placed the phone beside the documents. The screen's faint light cast a soft glow across her wedding ring, a reminder of everything she'd chosen to hide for love. Her gaze drifted to the window. Outside, the night stretched endless and quiet. For the first time, she didn't feel small in it. Instead, she felt like the storm that would change everything when morning came. She reached for the bracelet she'd found earlier, the twin to the one that had fallen at dinner. The engraved Aurora Holdings logo caught the moonlight as she placed it carefully beside the acquisition file, her voice barely a whisper. Tomorrow, Daniel. Tomorrow you'll know who I really am. Then she closed the hidden drawer with a soft click. The sound echoed down the hall, sharp, certain, final. Upstairs, Daniel turned in his sleep, unaware that the woman lying beside him no longer belonged to his world. Downstairs, Emily's phone buzzed again, one unread email glowing on the screen. Shareholder meeting invitation, Carter Industrial Group, Friday, 7 p.m. And with it, the stage for revenge was set. The conference room lights blazed bright and cold, throwing sharp reflections off the glass walls. Papers rustled, pens clicked, and the air was thick with tension, the kind that only existed when money and power were on the line. Emily Carter stood at the head of the table, calm as stone. Across from her sat three people: her assistant Grace Turner, her legal advisor Martin Hale, and her financial strategist Olivia Park. All of them watched her in quiet anticipation. Everything is finalized, Martin said, sliding a stack of documents toward her. Carter Industrial Group is now under full control of Aurora Holdings. The words hit like the sound of a gavel. Final. Irreversible. Emily's fingers brushed over the papers, her expression unreadable. For weeks she had planned this: every call, every transfer, every silent move. And now, sitting beneath the white glow of that boardroom, the empire that once belonged to her father-in-law rested quietly in her hands. Do you want me to release the acquisition notice? Grace asked softly, her eyes flicking up from her tablet. Emily looked out the window instead. Below them, the city glimmered like 1,000 scattered stars, each light a reminder of the world that never noticed her before. Not yet, Emily said. Let them have their calm before the storm. The room fell into silence. Flashback. 3 weeks earlier. The sound of rain against the car window had been soft that night. Emily sat in the back seat, laptop open, the glow from the screen lighting her face. On the call was Martin, the legal advisor who had been with her since her first company. Are you sure you want to do this quietly? He asked. It's a hostile takeover in all but name. Emily's tone was steady. It's not hostile, Martin. It's justice. Grace, seated beside her, had nodded with quiet conviction. Aurora Holdings will stay as the proxy, right? Emily smiled faintly. Yes. No one will trace it back to me, at least not until I decide they should. Martin's voice came through the speaker, cautious but respectful. And if they find out too late, then, Emily said, closing her laptop, they'll finally understand what respect costs. The rain outside blurred the city lights into rivers of silver. Her reflection in the car window stared back, calm, patient, dangerous. Now in the present, Emily leaned back in her chair, lost for a moment in memory. Her mind replayed the dinner. Richard's mocking voice, Daniel's silence, Megan's smirk. Each face, each insult, had pushed her closer to this moment. Grace's voice broke the silence. You really want to stay anonymous? Emily looked at her, eyes steady. Not for long. Let's announce it. At the annual shareholder gala. Olivia blinked. That's next week, right? Friday night? Emily reached into her purse and pulled out an elegant cream envelope, the invitation Richard had sent Daniel earlier that morning. The embossed gold letters gleamed under the light. Carter Industrial Group Annual Shareholder Gala. Venue, the Regal Room. Emily smiled slowly. It was the same restaurant where Richard had humiliated her. Perfect, she said. They chose the right place to learn humility. Grace exhaled, half in awe, half in disbelief. You're planning to tell them there? Emily nodded once, her voice soft but razor-sharp. In the same room where they tore me down, they'll stand to applaud me. The clock on the wall ticked loud, deliberate, final. Emily reached for her pen, signing the final authorization page with a calm hand. Schedule a meeting with the board before the gala, she said. No leaks, no hints. This has to hit them. All at once. Martin gathered the papers carefully. Understood. As they stood to leave, Emily stayed seated for a moment, looking down at the table. Her reflection glimmered faintly on the glass surface, two Emilys, side by side, the woman they thought was powerless and the woman they were about to meet. She whispered to herself, they wanted a lesson. Let's make it unforgettable. The sound of her pen clicking shut was the only sound in the room. That night, as Emily left the office, her phone buzzed a message from Daniel. Dad says we might be losing investors. Something about a new buyer named Aurora Holdings. Do you know anything about that? Her lips curved slightly. The storm had begun. The elevator doors burst open to the sound of raised voices. Papers flew across the marble floor, phones rang non-stop, and the once proud office of Carter Industrial Group was drowning in chaos. Daniel Carter rushed through the lobby, confusion on his face. The employees, who used to greet him, now avoided his eyes. Someone whispered his name as he passed. Another murmured, "Did you hear? The takeover went through." He froze for a second. What takeover? No one answered. He hurried toward his father's office, pushing open the glass doors without knocking. Inside, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Richard Carter stood by the window, his phone pressed tightly to his ear, voice low but sharp. I don't care what the board says. Find out who the hell this Aurora Holdings is. Daniel blinked. Dad, what's going on? Richard slammed the phone down and turned, his face red with fury. We've been blindsided. Some new company, Aurora Holdings, just bought controlling shares of Carter Industrial Group overnight. Daniel frowned. That's impossible. Who could afford that? Richard's jaw clenched. Someone very quiet and very rich. And they've been planning this for months. Every move was hidden under shell. Corporations, we didn't see it coming. The old man's voice cracked for the first time Daniel could remember. They now own 51% of the company, Daniel. I don't even own my own name anymore. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then the door opened, and Megan Hayes stepped in perfectly dressed, confident, too calm for the chaos around her. She carried a folder under her arm and smiled faintly. Good morning, gentlemen, she said. The news is spreading. The employees are nervous. The investors are panicking. Everyone's asking who the new owner is. Richard glared at her. Do your job, Megan. Manage the communication team. She gave a small nod, but her eyes drifted to the large digital notice board on the wall. A name flashed across it, Aurora Holdings Limited, bold and final. Her smirk faltered. For a split second, something in her expression changed confusion, even fear. Her mind flickered back to that dinner night, to the bracelet that rolled under the table. The engraved letters she had noticed, Aurora Holdings. It couldn't be. But before she could speak, Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to sound confident. Whoever they are, they'll want us to stay. We're too valuable to fire. Right, Dad? Richard didn't respond. He just looked older, smaller somehow, his empire slipping away piece by piece. Megan forced a smile. You're right, Daniel. Maybe they'll even promote you. Her tone carried something almost mocking now, a mix of bitterness and denial. Daniel smiled weakly, unaware of the unease behind her words. Exactly. This is just business. It'll settle. But nothing was settling. Across the floor, Richard's secretary rushed in with a trembling hand, holding a letter. Sir, this was sent from the new owner's office. Richard snatched it and tore it open. His face drained of color as he read aloud. Effective immediately. The Carter Industrial Group. Board is to convene under new leadership this Friday. Attendance mandatory. Friday? Daniel repeated. That's the same day as the shareholder gala. Richard nodded slowly, eyes still on the letter. Whoever this is, they're making it personal. Megan shifted, trying to steady her breath. Aurora Holdings, she whispered. Why does that name sound so familiar? Richard ignored her and slammed his fist on the desk. Find them, Daniel. I want to know who's behind this before Friday night. Daniel straightened, trying to look strong. Don't worry, Dad. I'll fix this. He walked out, Megan following close behind. As the elevator doors closed, Megan turned to him. Daniel, if this Aurora Holdings is who I think it is, you might not want to know the truth. He gave a quick laugh, brushing her off. You worry too much. People like that don't come after families like ours. Her voice dropped lower. That's exactly what scares me. In his office, Richard picked up the fallen bracelet from his desk, the one he had kept since the dinner. The engraved logo caught the light again. Aurora Holdings. For the first time, he realized it wasn't just familiar, it was identical. He stared at it, frozen, the sound of the ticking clock echoing like thunder. At that same moment, across town, Emily Carter stood before a mirror in her office, rehearsing the words she would speak at the gala, the words that would make the Carters' world collapse completely. The sound of applause roared through the grand dining hall as chandeliers shimmered above the guests. The Carter Industrial Group annual shareholder gala was in full motion, a night meant to celebrate legacy, power, and wealth. Every table gleamed with silver cutlery, crystal glasses, and golden centerpieces. The scent of expensive perfume filled the air. At the front, a massive banner hung proudly. Carter Industrial Group, 60 years of excellence. But beneath that grandeur was tension so sharp it could be felt in the air. Richard Carter stood at the podium, smiling, his voice calm but tight. Tonight, he began, we celebrate the strength and tradition of our company, a legacy my family has carried for generations. His hand trembled slightly as he held the microphone. The takeover by Aurora Holdings had shaken him, but he was determined to pretend control. Daniel sat near the front, his tie perfectly straight but his nerves unraveling. Megan sat beside him, her smile bright but uneasy. Every so often, her eyes darted toward the door. Something about the night felt off. Before we continue, Richard said, I want to assure everyone that Carter Industrial remains strong, the very heart of this nation's industry. Our investors, the double doors at the back opened with a soft, deliberate click. Every head turned. The room fell into sudden, stunned silence. Emily Carter stepped through. She wore a black silk gown that shimmered under the lights, every step graceful and controlled. Around her wrist was the same bracelet Richard had once picked up, the one engraved with Aurora Holdings. The quiet became almost holy. People whispered. Some gasped. Daniel's fork slipped from his hand, clattering against the plate. Emily? He whispered, barely believing it. She didn't look at him. Her steps echoed as she crossed the marble floor, her gaze fixed on the stage. Richard's face drained of color. What is she doing here? He muttered, too low for the microphone to catch. Emily reached the podium, her calm expression unbroken. She turned to the host, who stood frozen beside Richard. May I? The man hesitated, then handed her the microphone. Good evening, she said, her voice smooth and clear. I'm honored to join you tonight. A few guests exchanged confused looks. Others leaned forward. Emily paused for just a moment, letting the suspense stretch. Then, she smiled faintly. On behalf of Aurora Industrial Group, the new parent company of Carter Industrial, I'd like to officially welcome you all. The words hit the room like thunder. A single glass shattered somewhere in the back. Someone gasped aloud. Richard's face turned white. His lips parted, but no words came out. Daniel stood up suddenly. What are you talking about? His voice cracked. Emily turned toward him, her gaze calm, steady. Exactly what I said. Richard's voice trembled with anger. This is absurd. You couldn't possibly. Oh, but I could, Emily said softly. And I did. She placed a folder on the podium, the official merger documents. The company seal gleamed under the lights. The transaction was finalized weeks ago. Aurora Holdings acquired controlling shares quietly, with every signature approved and verified. Your lawyers can confirm. A ripple of whispers swept through the audience. Phones came out. Screens lit up. Megan's eyes widened as she remembered the bracelet. Aurora Holdings. She had seen it that night, she just hadn't looked close enough. Emily continued, her voice calm, almost kind. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here for truth. Some of you laughed at me when I was just the wife with no career. Others told me I didn't belong. She looked directly at Richard, her tone soft but unshakable. I was never beneath this family. I simply stood quietly while you built walls of pride. Richard swallowed hard. You tricked us. No, Emily interrupted. I tested you. Then her eyes shifted to Daniel. He looked lost, eyes glossy, hands shaking slightly. Daniel, she said gently, you taught me what respect looks like when it's gone. The line hung in the air, a soft blade cutting through silence. Tears welled in his eyes. Emily, please. She looked at him for a long moment, pain flickering beneath her calm. Then, she stepped back from the microphone. To everyone here, she said, turning toward the audience again, let this night remind you never measure a person by what they show you. Sometimes the quietest one in the room already owns the floor you're standing on. Applause didn't come right away. The silence stretched heavy, humbling. Then slowly a few claps began. They grew, echoing through the hall, until the entire room was applauding her, the woman they once dismissed. Richard sank into his chair, face pale, hands trembling. His empire, his name belonged to the woman he'd humiliated. Megan lowered her eyes, realization dawning like fire. Daniel whispered her name one last time, his voice breaking. Emily. She looked down at him, her expression unreadable. You'll understand, soon enough. Then she turned, walking away from the podium, the bracelet catching the light with every step. The applause faded behind her. The camera flashes glowed, like stars. She pushed open the same doors she had entered through, never looking back. As the doors closed behind her, Daniel stumbled after her, calling her name. In the hallway, his voice echoed, desperate and raw. And for the first time, he realized the woman he dragged out in shame was now the one who could destroy or forgive him. The heavy doors slammed open. Daniel burst through them, his voice echoing down the long marble corridor of the hotel. Emily! Guests in the hallway turned their heads, whispers rising like smoke. He didn't care. He ran past them, breath ragged, tie half undone, desperation etched into his face. At the far end of the hall, Emily walked calmly, her heels tapping against the floor in slow, steady rhythm. Her black gown trailed behind her like a quiet storm. Emily, wait! Daniel's voice cracked. Please listen to me. She stopped, but didn't turn. The chandelier light glowed against her hair, outlining her like a silhouette, carved from glass. He took a few steps closer, voice trembling. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was you, Aurora Holdings. All of this. Emily turned at last, her eyes meeting his. They were calm, but there was something in them that made him step back, something unreadable, powerful, and heartbreakingly distant. You didn't need to know who I was, she said softly. You just needed to treat me right. The sentence hit him harder than any shout could have. Daniel's mouth opened, but no sound came. His throat tightened, his hands shook. Around them, guests began to gather quietly near the ballroom doors, the same people who had seen the public revelation minutes earlier. Emily, he said again, voice breaking. I made a mistake. I was scared. My father, he pushed me into. Her voice cut through him like silk and steel. Your father didn't hold your hand that night when you dragged me out. You did. He froze. Her words replayed in his mind, pulling him back to that dinner, her silent face, his grip on her wrist, the sound of chairs scraping the floor. It all came rushing back, louder than ever. Daniel's breath came shallow now. He reached toward her, but she took a step back. You let them humiliate me, Daniel, she continued quietly. You stood there and said nothing. Tears filled his eyes. I didn't know how to protect you. I was wrong, please. And then slowly his knees gave out beneath him. The crowd gasped as Daniel Carter, the proud son, the businessman, the husband who once dragged his wife through shame, fell to his knees before her. His hands clutched at the floor, his voice shaking. I don't care about the company, or the money, or any of it. I just don't leave me like this. Emily stood still. The sound of his voice trembled against the silence, the same silence she had endured for years. Her eyes softened for just a moment, but then she drew a quiet breath. This isn't about leaving you, she said. It's about finding myself. The words echoed off the marble walls. Behind them, Richard Carter appeared at the ballroom doors, looking hollow, smaller than anyone had ever seen him. His empire had been taken, his pride stripped bare. And beside him, Megan stood frozen pale, terrified. Richard turned to Megan, his voice low and cutting. Get out. You're finished here. She swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. Sir, out! He barked, and she fled, her heels clattering across the floor. For a brief moment, Megan's gaze met Emily's. No words passed between them, only a silent acknowledgement that the game was over. Daniel still knelt, his head bowed. Please, Emily, he whispered. Don't walk away. I can change. She looked down at him, her expression unreadable. You already had the chance, she said quietly. You just didn't take it. The murmurs around them grew, but Emily didn't seem to hear them. She turned, walking toward the exit. As she passed a tall mirror in the hallway, her reflection split two Emilys side by side, the woman who once begged for respect and the woman who now commanded it. For a moment she paused, staring at her reflection. Her hand brushed against the cool glass. I lost myself once, she whispered, barely audible. Not again. Behind her, Daniel remained on his knees, surrounded by everything he thought mattered: power, reputation, family, all of it now meaningless. He lifted his head, tears streaking down his face, watching her walk away. Emily! He shouted one last time, his voice cracking. She didn't turn back. The doors opened before her with a soft hiss, and the night air rushed in cool, free, and silent. She stepped outside into the glow of the city lights, her expression calm but unreadable. The faint sound of her heels faded into the distance. Inside, Daniel collapsed fully onto the Fajr floor, covering his face. Around him, the guests whispered in disbelief, the mighty Carter name now reduced to echoes of regret. And in that silence, the last image of Emily in her black gown lingered like a haunting memory, the woman they broke, now whole again. Outside, as Emily reached her car, her phone buzzed with a single message from Grace. It's done. The final documents are signed. You own everything. Emily looked up at the night sky and whispered, then it's time to let go. The morning sun spilled across the skyline, golden light cutting through the glass walls of the Aurora Holdings office. The city was waking, but inside, Emily Carter was already at her desk, composed, steady, and completely in control. Her desk was clean except for a single folder marked Women's Empowerment Fund, Launch Phase. The logo of Aurora shimmered faintly on its cover, the same one once engraved on her bracelet. Her assistant, Grace Turner, entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. It's official, she said softly. Every last signature is done. Carter Industrial is now fully merged under Aurora. Emily looked up, a faint smile touching her lips. Good, she said. Now we build something better, something that doesn't destroy people to prove strength. Grace nodded, emotion in her eyes. You did it, Emily. Emily turned toward the window, watching the city bathe in sunlight. No, she murmured. I just stopped letting others define me. For a moment, silence filled the room, not heavy like before, but peaceful, the kind of silence that heals. Then her voice came again, calm and steady, like a reflection spoken aloud. I built my life in silence. I lost it in noise. But when silence spoke again, it was powerful enough to end empires. Her gaze drifted to the edge of her desk. There, lying in a beam of morning light, was the bracelet, the same one that had fallen at that dinner table long ago. She picked it up gently, turning it between her fingers. The reflection of the Aurora Holdings logo glowed inside the silver band, completing the circle. Emily smiled, whispering to herself, dignity is louder than revenge. Don't mistake humility for weakness. It might just own your world.